Welcome to History According to Bob, the enhanced podcast. This is an enhanced podcast on the Battlefield of Alesia, which is at the end of Caesar's Conquest of Gaul. Now, you can find this is an MP4, or I should say an M4A file, but you can also find this on YouTube. I will put it both up on my website as well as on YouTube. Now, this is, like I said, it's the end of Caesar's Conquest of Gaul, and if you look at a map of Caesar's conquest, these are two maps, which one of them shows you, the one on the left, shows you how Caesar worked his way north and conquering the various groups, and then you end up with revolts and other things, and they kind of spiral in. But you see how he gradually adds all of that territory. And then, of course, the chart off to the other side shows all the sites where he has his major battle. The one out at sea there in the Bay of Biscay is, of course, when he fought the Veneti. And so you have all these major battles. So it's very nice to have when you're reading Caesar's conquest to kind of keep track of it. Of course, the intent here is just to give you a little overview. But I did, something like 35 podcasts on the conquest of Gaul. So this would really work pretty well as well for all of those. And then, of course, Caesar's Conquest of Gaul, we finish it. The Battle of Alesia is pretty much the end of his conquest. He'll have a year of mopping up, and then, of course, his political opponents will come in, and that leads to the book, which is the Civil War. Wonderful Penguin classics. So you should be able to find these for a couple of bucks used online. They're pretty good to have. Of course, there are other people who then comment on what Caesar does. Plutarch and Suetonius and other historians. This is an interesting manuscript piece. This is a 9th century manuscript from the Conquest of Gaul, so it was a very popular book. You would have found it all over. It was constantly copied and carried down from generation to generation. But of course, the idea of this enhanced podcast is, of course, to give you an idea of what the battlefield area at Alesia looked like. And the Battle of Alesia, of course, is the final battle between Vercingetorix and Caesar in the Great Revolt, and it takes place in 52 BC. Now here we have a surviving coin of Julius Caesar, a nice gold coin. Those are usually hard to come by. And then you see one that was minted to show Caesar's victory over Vercingetorix. And it's not uncommon, particularly in this period, the end of the Republic and the beginning of the Empire, where major opponents they'll have coins made of them to kind of let the people know that the man in power has defeated this particular character. When we get to the assassination of Caesar, his assassins will actually produce coins with their face on them, with daggers on the backside, because they were very proud of it, at least for a short amount of time. Now, this is your typical military schematic showing Alesia, with a fortification, the town where Vercingetorix forces were trapped, and how Caesar then put a complete wall all the way around it. Now you notice that there's a trench on one section, and there's a wall on another section. They don't put all of these fancy defenses around the entire thing. It's not necessary. There's some areas that they're just not going to be able to attack, so there's no sense wasting all of that time and effort. Of course, once Caesar realized he was probably going to have to fight off reinforcements, then they put the second line, again, all the way around, so that they can protect the entire area. But once again, there's only going to be a certain location they're going to be able to attack. And then you can see the water resources, the two streams that go all the way around on one side and the other of the position of Vercingetorix. Now this is a nice artist view of the situation. So you have the large town up on the top on a little hillside. It's not really quite an Acropolis type thing, but it's up on top of a hill. And then you see the extensive fortifications all the way around it. You see areas where they've got places to put their horses and cattle and other things. And of course Caesar's men then can move from one place to the other depending on where the attack is the most difficult. And then here is a cutaway view showing the most heavily defended area. Now this would be pointing inward, so this would be the inner wall pointing towards Alesia. So if Vercingetorix is coming down, this is what he would be running into. And some historians claim that some of these recreations that have been made are a little bit too extensive, but there certainly was a lot of work done. Here's a more colorful version. This one you find in most of the Osprey Men-at-Arms series books on Caesar and the conquest. And you have two trenches. One could have water or would have water, and you'd have a dry one. And of course, you got to fill those in order to get up over the wall. So this is really difficult for Vercingetorix to get out. And you see the Abasa, which is the sticks or pieces of trees that are stuck into the ground that are pointed. And then here's a model, and you can see the holes in front are little traps. There's caltrops that are laid all across there. They have the Abasa, you have the trenches, and then you have the towers. So it's pretty formidable. Again, from the Osprey Men-at-Arms series, you see some artistic examples of some of the spikes that they would have used. Some of them you just stick them in a piece of wood, so they're sticking up. Now that can lame a horse, but it also lames a man as well. And then you see the Gallic relief cavalry. They don't usually ride those in the combat. Frequently they'll ride to combat and then dismount. And then here's from a museum in the area around Alesia showing some of the examples of the caltrops that would have been thrown out. Of course, these can be picked up then later on and used again. Very effective, very cheap. And then there are some recreations of the fort. So here's one of them where you can see the trenches, you can see the towers. And then this is what I like to refer to as the Vercingetorix's view of the fortifications. And again, the spiked Abasa, the pieces of trees, and very formidable. You know, even when you get to this, getting to that point is tough. And then here you have, again, a little more sweeping view of this fortification region. And then this one kind of puts it into perspective. Again, you see the inner and outer fort, but the red area is the major points of attack. So the big square in the upper center of the screen is where the relief army camped. And then you see where they attempted to attack. And then you see the Vercingetorix's arrows where he came out once he figured out what his relief army was going to try to do. But the fighting is really just in this one little quarter section, so to speak. So it's really not necessary for Caesar to defend the whole region. He obviously has troops there that can be moved, but there is a limit. And of course, those are the areas where you find the heaviest defenses and fortifications. So this kind of puts in perspective where everything is. And of course, here's an artist's view of Vercingetorix surrendering. In this case, he looks very stately. He's got his helmet on. He's on a black stallion heading down to Caesar. And then this is the one you usually find online all the time. It's the most common one. But you'll notice that Vercingetorix has changed his horse. He's on a white horse now, so this must be more of the Vercingetorix I'm a martyr situation. And remember, there's two versions of his surrender. The one is he rode down and then rode around Caesar first and then surrendered. And the second one is he rode up and surrendered, but Caesar kind of waves his hand, and one of his centurions grabs the horse's reins and twists them, and the horse collapses, and Vercingetorix falls on the ground, and Caesar supposedly says, now that is a much better position from which to surrender. At any rate, it's over. Now here we have the actual battlefield area today, some of the excavations in the region, and there's some of the hillside around Alesia. So it's a beautiful area in which to visit. There's not a lot of monuments or anything there. There is one, this great big monument dedicated to Vercingetorix, and of course there's another picture of the coin. So this hopefully will give you some idea, if you've been listening to the 3 podcasts that I did on the Battle of Alesia, what I was talking about. And then, of course, those are on the archive in the History According to Bob website. So you can go back, you can listen to those after you've listened to this or watch this at the same time, and to get some idea. At any rate, I hope you enjoyed that, and I encourage you that if you like history, stop by the website, which is historyaccordingtobob.com or summahistorica.com, and check out the website. There's an archives there. There's a frequently asked questions section, and then don't forget to look at the CDs. I've been doing historical podcasts for almost 6 years, and I have 1,600 or more shows, and a lot of those have been put into topic CDs that you can get and that are in order. So look at the CD section of the website as well. And again, thank you very much for watching.